that you have come to royal position for such a time as this. Time waits for no one. It has a startling way of reminding us that we are a moment and that God is forever. My story is about time and how God in his sovereignty allowed me to see his kingdom come. My name is Esther, and I know what it is like to lack vision and to have grasped it. Growing up, I had no mother or father, but was under the care of my dear cousin Mordecai. And while there were times that I couldn't see any great plans for my future, God most certainly did. I lived through a time of tremendous turmoil, where extermination breathed heavy down my neck and knocked hard at my people's door. You see, there's been a long history of killing men and women simply because they believe in the living God. As if killing people who worship God gets rid of God himself. An unthinkable plot to annihilate all the Jewish people hung heavy over the palace like a thick, dark cloud. As I recalled God's faithfulness to me, I realized that my purpose must be his purpose, that my time is his time, and that forever my heart must be at his service. I needed him and him alone to reveal the battle plan, and if I perished, I perished. I knew I was here for such a time as this. Unusual times call for unusual action. And so I called for 3 days of prayer and fasting throughout the entire kingdom. And I fell prostrate before the Lord. And I heard the words of God. And I received a vision from the Almighty. I then proceeded to invite the king twice to dinner. And I told him of the evil plot to destroy all the Jewish people. My people. And again, I found the Lord most true to his word, that everything that is hidden in darkness will be brought into the light, and the motives of men's hearts will be made known. His Majesty responded most favorably, and the Jewish people once again beheld a miraculous deliverance. I suppose I could have argued back and forth with God, telling him all the reasons why I wasn't qualified to be in this position at this particular time, and thus accomplished nothing. But I learned this, that while we may not understand why God has placed us where he has, it doesn't mean that God doesn't have a plan. For God knows the plans he has for us, and they are good plans. Plans to prosper us and not to harm us. Plans to give us hope and a future. A calendar may tell the day, but it doesn't have the power to understand time. God is calling you, as he did to me, to understand the times that you are living in against the blueprint of eternity. For we are a vapor. God is eternal. We are here today and gone tomorrow. Will you use your position for His heavenly purpose? Teach us, O God, to number our days aright, so that we may gain a heart of wisdom. May the favor of the Lord our God rest upon us and establish the work of our hands. Yes, establish the work of our hands.
As He called us for a time such as this. Last week we began to talk about vision for the church. As I said last week, I'm a firm believer if you don't know where you're going, you don't really know how to get there. I talked about mission. A mission for the church, and as far as I'm concerned, Jesus gave us the mission of the church in what we call the Great Commission. All we would ever need to know about what mission is, He gave us. We're to make disciples. We're to be disciples, students, if you will, and we're to make disciples. We talked about how our vision would work and how our vision would help us to accomplish our mission when we understood what the vision was and when we understood how this should affect everything that we do in the church. I want to read to you from the Bible a portion of the story that the lady portraying Esther just talked about. But before I do, I want to set up the story a little bit for you, for those who may not be familiar with it. The Jewish people were banished to Babylon during the exile period. And King Xerxes, after he had gotten rid of his wife, Vashti, was in the market for a new bride. Now, this was in the days when a king could have many wives. My hat's off to him for doing that. Sometimes one's pretty tough, but they'd have many wives. But Esther became his favorite. There was only one little problem. You see, Esther was a Jew. And as I said, the Jews were in exile there in Babylon. And were not well thought of. Esther, as she's told in the video, she had a cousin named Mordecai that had raised her when her mother and father died. Mordecai would go out and walk by the harem every day, kept by King Xerxes to find out about Esther, find out what was happening. Time went by and King Xerxes appointed an evil man named Haman as his highest ranking official in his kingdom. Every day Haman would come out, and as he came out, that he would command all the people to bow down to him. But old cousin Mordecai, he refused. No matter what they did, Mordecai, who was a Jew, served God and God alone, and that's the only one he was going to bow down to. He refused to bow down to Haman. this just made Haman so mad he could hardly stand himself. And he went to the king, and he convinced King Xerxes that all the Jews should be wiped out. He said, here we've got these people in our land. They're foreign people. They're not like us. They don't believe like us. We need to just get rid of them. Wipe them all out. King Xerxes agreed, not knowing that Esther, his favorite wife, was a Jew. She kind of failed to fill out that part in the resume, She didn't let on that she was a Jew. So Mordecai, when he finds out about Haman's plan, gets word to Esther to try to get her to intervene on behalf of the Jews. Of course, Esther's response was she could be killed. You didn't just come knocking on the king's door. Even if you were the favorite wife, you just didn't do that. If she approached the king without an invitation, she could be killed. And then Mordecai sends this reply in Esther chapter 4, 13, 14. It says, Mordecai sent this reply to Esther. Don't think for a moment that because you're in the palace, you will escape when all other Jews are killed. If you keep quiet at a time like this, deliverance and relief for the Jews will arise from some other place, but you and your relatives will die. Who knows if perhaps you were made queen for just such a time as this. You see, most of us would have thought, nah, I don't think so. You see the old movies and the queens and whoever they are, they have servants that are fanning them and feeding them grapes and stuff. Pretty good life, probably. And Esther had this pretty good life. So most of us said, I don't think so. I'm not going to risk my life. I'm sure that God made me queen so I could live here. So I could live in the palace in this lap of luxury. Isn't that why God does things? I'm just fine. This has nothing to do with me. They don't even know that I'm a Jew. But of course, Esther did realize that God made her queen for a time such as this. I think God has called us all. God has called us all for a time such as this. Even the oldest among us, if we really got down and talked about it, we think, man, time sure goes by fast. Cheryl, time goes by fast, don't it?
Real fast.
You got it. What did she say on there? It's like a vapor. It's just quick. But see, most of us sit around and we keep waiting. We keep waiting to do something, thinking and praying and hoping that something's going to happen. But all of a sudden, time gets away from us. I think God has called every one of us for a time like this. So I want to look at the title of this sermon. Reflecting the life of Jesus in our community. I think it's a simple sentence that we can apply to our life, we can apply to our church, we can apply to everything. It should be our vision. This should drive everything that we do. This should drive every plan that we make. When it does, we'll begin to see positive change. We'll begin to see things happen again. We'll be reminded over and over what our purpose is. So I want to dissect this statement a little bit and see what we can learn from it. First, we have to ask ourselves, what do we do? What is it that this says to do? I guess I told you last week that our vision would include instruction. That's part of my job, to kind of instruct, right? Well, here's the beginning. It's reflecting. Gosh, what does that mean? Well, if we go to the expertise of Mr. Webster, then the very first definition of reflect is to bend or cast back or cause something to change direction. What's the very first thing you think of when you think about reflecting something? A mirror. Yeah, that's the first thing I think about. We all use one every day. You know, you look and make sure you don't have green stuff in your teeth or whatever the case may be. We all use them. In biblical times, I'm told mirrors weren't like the mirrors we have today. Unfortunately, I'd like to have one of those mirrors that doesn't always reflect exactly what I look like, because sometimes it's pretty rough. They didn't see things as clearly as we can see in a mirror. In fact, Paul said in 1 Corinthians 13:12, now we see things imperfectly, like puzzling reflections in a mirror. But then we will see everything with perfect clarity. Saying they didn't see as perfectly in a mirror as we did. It was most likely just a polished piece of metal. What I think about when I think about that is that little reflecting piece on a heater. Does anybody have a gas heater in their house? An old-timey gas heater? It's got this shiny piece of metal behind the flame that helps reflect the heat. You see, you can not only reflect an image in a mirror, you can reflect heat as well. So if we used a heat source as our example on reflecting, then that would require that we focus energy in a direction. That's what that shiny piece of metal back there does. It's kind of like when you've been outside. You ever been outside and you had a fire built up in the wintertime when it was really cold? And it seems like you just can't get close enough to that fire. That's because all that heat's going out in different directions. There's nothing to guide it towards you. But if you have a piece of that shiny metal set up behind there, then it would be great, because all that heat would come to you. So I guess the first part of what we're supposed to be as a church is a reflector. As silly as that sounds, as I told you before, a lot of people have surefire methods to grow your church. Great stuff. You know, you read this book and your church will grow and souls will be saved. And that's, you know what? We don't need to make stuff up as we go along. We don't really need to invent new things. All we need to do is reflect what we have been given. Has anybody in here been blessed? Anybody? Well, there's a few people who've been blessed. Blessed beyond measure? I have. Yeah. If we've got all the blessings we need, why not reflect some of that back to other people? Why not give some of that away? You say, oh, well, I don't want anybody to get my blessings. You can't reflect it all. You can't reflect everything back. If you don't believe me, reach down there and touch that little shiny piece of metal on the back of the gas heater. It's hot too. Don't do that really, though. I don't want to be sued. But we got to give back some of what we've been given. There's a lot of grace. There's a lot of love. There's a lot of mercy that comes into every one of us every day. All we got to do is reflect some of it back. So what do we reflect back? Who or what must we reflect? The life of Jesus. There's a saying, I heard someone say that to be Jesus in your community. Yeah, that's all great. That's all fine and good. It's a good deal. Not knocking that at all. But, there's only one Jesus. We can never be Jesus. I can't be Jesus. I could never even come close to Jesus. But we can reflect back just a little bit of his life. If you had to say in one word, if you had to sum up the life of Jesus, if we're on one of those, you remember that that was like a game show that, they used to go back and they talk about this person's life, this celebrity. What was the name of it? I can't think of it now. But anyway, if we did, what's one thing you'd say about Jesus? One word you'd say about Jesus? Love. There you go. Wow. It's a great audience today. He loves us. His whole life was about love. It says John 13:34. Jesus said, so now I'm giving you a new commandment. Love each other. Just as I have loved you, you should love each other. Just as he loved his disciples. Just as he loves us. The life of Jesus Christ was built on the foundation of love. So what do we focus? What do we focus our energies on? It's what Jesus focused his energy on. People. And caring for them. By some scholars' accounts, there are at least 37 miracles of Jesus recorded in the Gospels. Matthew also tells us that all of the people were healed of illnesses. John records that if all the things were ever written down that Jesus did, that there wouldn't be enough books to hold them all. I don't have to sit and scratch my head very long to figure out why Jesus came to this earth. He came to this earth to live a life of service. He said it of himself in Mark 10:45. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve others, and to give his life as a ransom for many. So if he came to serve, what do you think that we're supposed to do? 1 John 2:6. Those who say they live in God should live their lives as Jesus did. If I say that I live in God, then I must live my life and reflect what he stood for. My life must be a mirror image of his. Maybe not a perfect mirror. Maybe not a mirror like we have today. Maybe not an exact reflection, because he was perfect and I'm not perfect. But a reflection that reflects back a good portion of the grace, the mercy, the forgiveness, and the love that I've been shown because of Jesus Christ. And where do we do all this? Where do we reflect the love of Jesus? Our community, of course. That's where we begin to show the life and the love of Jesus in our community. And those last three words are just as important as the first five. In our community. You see, most of us agree that we need to do something. We all agree on that. But we don't all agree what that something should be. First off, let's define what our community is. Webster again. He says that a community is a body of people living in the same place under the same laws. So here in Crossett, and we'll include North Crossett, West Crossett, I don't know, are there any more Crossets besides North and West? There's a South Crossett? Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Obviously, these people here can't get along, huh? We got a North Crossett, a South Crossett. Is there an East Crossett? Nope. Okay. Hats off to the people in the East Crossett who don't feel like they have to be a part of something different. But anywhere in Crossett, where we live under the same laws, we're considered a community. Whether we observe those laws or not is another question you have to pose to the sheriff out there. I don't know. But that's a different story. Now, I think the definition of community has changed somewhat with time, because at one point you probably looked at your community as, let's see whose house I can walk to in one day, because people lived quite a distance from each other. I think that our area of community has widened somewhat. We had some discussion on Wednesday night on who we were supposed to help. If we're supposed to help someone as a church. In Matthew 25, 44, 46, Jesus is telling a parable about the final judgment and how it will be. He says, then they will reply, Lord, when did we ever see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or naked or sick or in prison and not help you? And he will answer, I tell you the truth. When you refuse to help the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you are refusing to help me.